Hello, class. Professor Mo here. We are looking at a sample MLA paper that includes citations, and not only citations, but MLA formatting in general. This is just a good review of what it is you need to have in your essay as far as citations for the compare contrast, but also the title, heading, things of that nature. And so I just wanted to go over this. I will have a link, excuse me, to this paper, or not a link, I'm sorry. I'll actually have this paper right next to the video, so you can download this yourself or just view it online. And I'll also have a link there to the Purdue OWL Online Writing Center, where you can go and look at their other resources. So here's a first page of a 10-page paper. And let's just talk about the heading here, just again to kind of go over some of the basics here. I think most of you had this down for the summary response. Some people didn't in the rough draft. They had corrected it in the final. Some people hadn't corrected it. So it's good to go over and look at it again. Your name, the professor's name, the course number, and the date of the paper are double-spaced in 12-point Times New Roman font. Dates in MLA are written in this order: day, month, and year. Do not abbreviate the month. So here it's 12 February 2012. Excuse me. And you've got the writer's title. You've got the name of the professor. And then you've got the course, which would be, could be for you, English 1013, Comp 1. You could also call it Comp 1, but probably English 1013 is your best bet. And then the date here in this format. Green text boxes contain explanations of MLA style guidelines, and blue boxes contain directions for writing and citing in MLA style. So up here in the right-hand corner, we have page numbers begin on page 1, and they end on the final page, not on the works cited. If you have one, which you will in your comparison and contrast, type your name next to the page number in the header so that it appears on every page. And this is easy to do in Word. You double-click, you bring the header up, and then you can go in there, and you'll find page numbers, and it'll actually give you different options, and you're going to want to have it aligned on the right side, and it'll put the numbers in for you, and then you're able to just go in and type in your last name, and it'll do that on every page. So that used to be a chore until more recent versions of Word. Use personal pronouns, I, we, us, etc. at your instructor's discretion. For this paper, you are able to do that. I'm not going to really worry too much about you using personal pronouns, because I want you to compare and contrast the ideas of these two authors, but there's a little bit too room for you to give us some of your own perspective, right? But it is mainly the job of the compare and contrast, as we'll talk about more in detail next week, to really focus on the ideas of the two writers, right, or perspectives, whatever the sources may be. Titles are centered and written in 12-point Times New Roman font. The title is not bolded, underlined, or italicized. And you notice you come down two from the heading here to the title, and then another two to the actual text. The introductory paragraph should set the context for the rest of the paper, tell your readers why you are writing and why your topic is important. And we've gone over that many times. And the thesis statement is often, but not always, the last sentence of the introduction. The thesis is a clear position that you will support and develop throughout your paper. This sentence guides your paper. And that's why I have told you, depending on the length of the paper, it really should be that last sentence. If you were writing, a 10, 15, 20-page plus paper, yes, you could probably have a little more leeway. But I think for the length that we are looking at, which is about 3 to 4 pages, you're going to want to have that thesis right, the last sentence in the first paragraph. And that really is structurally important, because it does come at a good place when the reader is going to be aware, okay, now when we've looked at, I don't know if I've done that chart with you guys yet in this class. I did it in my other class. But when you look at the movement from general to specific, which happens in a paper, the most general is going to be the introduction, and then it slowly becomes less general, and then it becomes very specific, right? And that is when we get to the thesis. So that's a way of guiding the reader. And so when we have the thesis in that place, they know then, okay, well, now we're in the meat of the sandwich that is the paper, right? We're in those body paragraphs. And so that's why I really like it to be in that place. It should always, I think, excuse me, the thesis should always be the last sentence before the first body paragraph. That doesn't necessarily mean you're able to get it at one introductory paragraph, but that usually, again, would be if you're writing a much longer essay. For the length you're working with, you're going to have one opening paragraph, and your last sentence is going to be the thesis. MLA requires double spacing throughout a document. Do not single space any part of the document. If your paper is long, you may want to write about how your paper is organized. This will help your reader to follow your ideas. And this is a 10-page paper, so that's a very good thing to do. You're writing something much shorter. You don't have to worry about that. However, you could say, I have chosen to compare and contrast these ideas from these two authors and sources in this way, and we'll talk more about that next week. MLA, let's see, we already discussed that here. When using headings in MLA, title the main sections, level 2 headers, in a different style font than the paper's title, e.g. in small caps. This is not something that generally we see in papers of a short length. You don't necessarily have to have any of these titles, section titles. You can. I would kind of encourage you not to. I know some people did that in the summary response for Plato's Allegory, and I didn't take off points, but it's not something I would encourage on a short paper. If, however, you do find that it is organizationally helping you, let me know that. Send me an email and say, Mr. Moe, it really helps me to organize the information this way, and that's fine. But if you don't have to do it, I would recommend you don't. It's really not something frequently done, at least not that I'm aware of, not my experience. The headings used here follow a 3-level system to break the text into smaller sections. The different levels help organize the paper and maintain consistency in the paper's organization. You may use your own format for headings as long as they are consistent. Okay, so again, you'd want to reach out to me and say, is it okay if I use headings, etc. Headings, though not required by MLA style, can help the overall structure and organization of a paper. Use them at your instructor's discretion to help your reader follow your ideas. Now, I guess I'm old-fashioned. My belief is that if the paper is structured correctly with transitional sentences, if it's got a clear thesis and restatement of thesis, then you will, in every sentence, certainly at every transitional point, you will not need a heading, because you're telling the reader, this is what we talked about, this is what we're going to talk about now. This is what we talked about, this is what we're going to talk about now. And in doing that, it is guiding them without the need of these headings. Again, you may not see it that way, and if you reach out to me, I'm not opposed to that. If there's a grammatical, mechanical, or spelling error in the text you are citing, type the quote as it appears. This is important to know. Follow the error with SIC, right? Be sure to differentiate the level 3 headers from the level 2 headers. And again, that would not be something you need to worry about if you're not going to use headers. Here we go. In-text citations occur after the quote. We saw that in that other video, but before the period. The authors or authors' names go before the page number with no comma in between. So we have here an example right here. It's a rather long sentence, and that's okay. If you have a long quote, you don't have to worry about the sentence being, like a run-on or a very complex sentence. And from a grammatical standpoint, as long as you're doing it correctly, right? You're citing it correctly. So this increase accompanied the decrease in rural populations as farmers who, quote, preferred trade, transportation, or tinkering, unquote, to the tasks of tending to crops and animals found great opportunities in the city. Danhoff 7. Now, I do want to point something out that I didn't in that first video. I didn't give you an example of this, but this is something that I think maybe throws students off. Let's say you're quoting something, right? And in your chosen sentence or fragment, whatever it may be, it's probably going to be a full sentence or maybe more than one, but maybe you just use a phrase. That particular phrase has a quote within it. Oh no, what do I do? Well, notice here what they did. So here they opened this right here, which is their quotation, with just regular double quotes. But the person they're citing, Danhoff, he put a little bit, he actually, in his original citation, would have had 2 quotes, right? He would have had pairs around tinkering. But when we're quoting somebody who is using quotations, we just use one. This indicates to the reader that they used this phrase here and they had put it in quotes originally, but because we're quoting them, we're going to just use one set of quotes rather than the usual two. So two go around the whole quote, and if there is one word that they themselves had quoted, well, then we would just use one. So and it looks weird, but this is correct right here. So you see the one quote, quotation mark, and then the other two there. And I believe use endnotes to explain a point in your paper that would otherwise disrupt the flow of the text. Something you're not going to need to worry about in this paper. They're talking about, they are here talking about using footnotes, also not a consideration. If you cite the same source multiple times in a row, you do not have to repeat the author's last name until you cite a different author or start a new paragraph. So if in this paragraph you are just talking about one of the authors, depending on how you structure your comparison and contrast, well, if you use the last name at the beginning, we are going to know you're still talking about that person, assuming you've used a different name. And so in that case, you wouldn't have to use it. But what you would really want to make sure you're doing is that you are using it until you you want to make sure that you are telling us at least somewhere. I have read papers and I've written papers where I've forgotten to put the name in there. And then it's kind of confusing to the reader. Okay, who are they citing here? And the reason I usually do that is because I have used multiple quotes from one author in one paragraph. Now, we talked about this in the other video. It may be the case that as you're putting together your paper, you find, okay, in this paragraph, I'm quoting this article 3 times. Is there a way to paraphrase so that you don't find yourself doing that? If so, I highly recommend you do the extra work to do that. Remember, when we paraphrase, it's still not our idea. And so we have got to have the citation, so the page number if there is one, and the author name. If, however, we are summarizing or paraphrasing, we don't put quotes. And depending on the length, we may have to offset that text. I don't think that's going to be a case in this paper here. So we go down here, and then if you delete words from the original quotation, insert an ellipsis, 3 periods with a space between and after each one. So they did this here because they didn't need all the words, and it was clear. Now, it's important too, is it clear if you remove some words? Sometimes that's another method of shortening your source that you're quoting, or your quoted part of the source, right? So agricultural organizations were then formed to, quote, encourage experimentation, hear reports, observe results, and exchange critical comments. So by putting the ellipsis here, it indicates there's part of this longer sentence missing, but it still made sense grammatically. We were able to understand it without those words, and that's what that will do for us here. Transitions connect paragraphs and unify writing. And again, I'm a big believer in every new sentence. New paragraph should start with a sentence that is going to remind us in some way. It doesn't have to be, restating the entire the entire sentence, paragraph rather. It can be something as simple as having considered what was done in 1923. We now move to how this same situation was treated 10 years later. That's a great transition. It reminds them, hey, we were talking about how this thing, which we would know that from reading the paper, happened in 1923, a specific date, and now 10 years later, 1933, how did that happen? That's a great transition, and it's not something that seems like it's repeating everything we just read, but it does remind us. It keeps in context what came before while introducing what is going to come. Looking here just at a couple of other things, notice how this paragraph ends with a brief mention of print sources, and the next paragraph begins with a discussion of print information. Okay, body paragraphs often, but don't always, have these 4 elements: a transition, a topic sentence, evidence, and a brief wrap-up sentence. Yes, the well-structured paragraph will have that. And you can go through this paper. I'm just hitting a couple of main points that I want to make sure that you're aware of. You certainly are free to go through this and read this, and anything that is confusing to you, this probably paper right here, this 10-page paper from Purdue, is going to answer it for you. Block quotes begin on a new line, are double-spaced, and are indented 1/2 inch from the margin. Do not add quotation marks not present in the original. Okay, this sometimes trips it up. And look, I just want to remind you that there's no judgment when it comes to MLA. I always struggled with MLA, and it was always just a pain, but it's a necessary evil. I mean, some people wouldn't say it's an evil. I'm not saying it's evil, but oh man, it is just, to me, it's always the thing I worried about the most. which is not, when I'm writing a paper, I'm not really thinking about those details. I usually wait until the very, the rough draft before I really go, okay, let me go and check it. And that is up to you. I know some writers, some students in the past have actually, now this is going back a ways, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. You get note cards, and you write everything you're going to use, every quote, on a note card, and you write it in exact proper MLA citation, and then you put it in order based on the order you're going to use it in the paper that it's going to appear in your essay, and then you have that numbered. And then we used to be required to do this when I was in high school. It was a long time ago, but I think it's a great method. And then you had to hand in those cards. Obviously, I'm not going to require that, but it is a good method. That way, when you organize your paper, you've got that written down on those cards. You know exactly the format. You're just typing it in. You don't have to go. Now, if you want to, you can put in text into one of these online citation things. But if you're using this as a reference and you want to write it on cards or another document, that's a great way to keep track of it. And it may help you to just get a better handle on it. So the citation information, author name, and page number follows the quote's end punctuation here, right? Notice, too, they do have a footnote, but we're not bothering with those for this. So they're using this much text, and it is going to quoted text runs longer than 4 lines once typed in your paper. You're going to use the block quotes, right? So this is more than 4 lines. It's 5. And notice that they mentioned the source up here, who is John Nicholson, and then they put the page number here. Going down here, periods occur before the end of quotation marks if the citation information is given already in the sentence. Okay. So that is something to keep in mind. If a source has 3 or more authors, use the first author's last name followed by et al. We talked about that in the other video as well. Kind of just want to continue to jump. Here's another heading. Here's their concluding paragraph. Remember, it wraps up what you've been discussing in your paper, and the first sentence. Now, I know some teachers may not agree, and that's fine. I feel for your purposes and in this composition course, and as you go through college, depending on length, I really believe the thesis should be the last sentence of the first paragraph, and that when we get to the final paragraph, the first sentence should be the restated thesis. And I make it very clear, and if I haven't done that, I'm going to remind you again, but I think I did on the summary response. Restating a thesis is not the same as repeating the thesis or copying it, right? You are not reusing it, you are rewriting it, saying the same thing in a different way. And man, does that really, I've had students that just refuse to do it. They're like, I can't do it. And I said, you can. It's harder work, but it makes you a better writer to take the same thing that you've said, written in one way, and then to reformat it. And it has a function. It has the function of reminding the reader in a way that is new, and that signals them, okay, well, I know this information. They're reminding me what I just read. Remember, the attention span very short, even on a 4-page paper. But what this does is they're not repeating themselves, but they are telling me what I've been talking about. And that's something that's an unconscious realization. But the good paper, the well-structured paper, is going to have a lot of that kind of unconscious stuff going on, and readers don't even realize it's there because hopefully, again, it depends on their experience and what they've been exposed to and trained, how they've been taught. They are going to be subconsciously aware of it because they've experienced it. And we see this in public speaking. We see this in a number of areas. You'll see this in the workplace where you're going to reiterate information in a different way and remind people what you said or written, and that is a strategy that helps them to retain that information. Coming on down here, 2 notes, which are not at all important. However, finally, the works cited is. And so here's how we do the citation for works cited. It is a list of all the sources in your paper. It begins on a new page. You center the title Works Cited without underlining. And even though it has quotes here, that's just because they're talking about works cited, those 2 words together. That doesn't mean you put quotes. Notice no quotes here. I've seen people do that. I've seen them italicize it. I've seen them underline it. None of that is there. If there is only one entry, title this page Work Cited. That may happen. It won't in this paper. You're only going to really have 2, but it may be the case you only have 1 source. Now, a lot of teachers, depending on the research paper, its purpose and length, they may require you to have a minimum number, but it isn't unheard of to have simply 1. If a source has 3 or more authors, only the first one shown in the source is given. It is followed by et al. Okay, you're not going to have that situation here, but this is a good example for your future reference. And so I hope you'll come back to this. You'll save this in a document and keep this as you go forward in your college career. This is going to be a great resource so that you always want to minimize problems when you're working on anything. And if you can minimize or completely eradicate errors with MLA citation, then that's like a huge percentage of things you don't have to worry about anymore. MLA now requires only the publisher and not the city of publication. The 8th edition also does not require sources to have a publication marker, such as print. Okay, and yes, I can remember when these things have changed. And it's very frustrating because I had been out of education for a while, and when I came back to it, noted that, oh, look at this. In 2016, they made these changes, and it threw me for a bit of a loop there. If a print source does not list a publisher, and you can infer who the publisher is, place the publisher's name in brackets. That will happen sometimes. You will not have a publisher listed, so you want to just kind of infer and take a shot in the dark, and it's going to be enough, right? In this case, it's the federal government, right? Department of Agriculture, that's going to be the federal government. I'm looking here at this next one. MLA now requires URLs when possible when citing online sources. Omit HTTP:// from the address. The date of access is optional, but be sure to include it whenever possible, since online works can be changed or removed at any time. All right, so yes, that is very important. Right? Remember, as we said in that other video, we're creating a trail so that folks can go find this information should they want to after reading our paper. List the title of the source in quotation marks and the title of the container in italics followed by a comma and the date of publication. Since this is an online source, include the URL and date of access. And so we have an example of all that here. And then here on this final page, we have our last citation. And remember, it does look weird, okay? But this is the citation format that MLA wants, the Modern Language Association. So yes, your first line here is going to be set up this way, and then you're going to tab these. And these last names, right, of your author or source is going to be arranged alphabetically, even if it looks bizarre. This is the right format. So don't go by, I remember I used to go by looking and say, oh, that doesn't look right. And no, that you want to go by what is the correct citation. So this paper that we're looking at here is really, I think, an invaluable resource. If you have any questions about citation, and my videos haven't covered it, this, as well as the Purdue Online Writing Lab, the Purdue OWL, will answer those questions for you. And so be sure that you use them. Now, I'm going to try this, and I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's see if I go back here. Yes, okay. So if we go back to, this is the source of the paper. I just opened it in another window, but you can go here, and this is Purdue University, their website, the OWL, the Online Writing Center, College of Liberal Arts, and tremendous wealth of any possible question you have about resources when it comes to MLA. You've got the sample paper, tables, figures, examples, PowerPoint presentation, in any number of things. And they've also got it for other sources, which you don't have to worry about. You may, depending on what your discipline is, what you're going to get your major in. It may not be MLA at all. And so this would also be a great resource in that case. But also you can put in your size here, your source rather, your citation, and you just select from this drop down. If you're doing a journal article, which is what you'll be doing, then you can search, and it may appear here, and they may be able to have that citation there done for you, and it's powered by Citation Machine. So just be careful with that. Again, I personally don't like using them myself. Now, I'm not telling you not to. I always like to look at an example, and then find the example that corresponds to what I have to cite, and then follow that example. That way, I know without a doubt I'm not depending on a machine to do it for me, and then have to go back and check that anyway. If that's the case, I just as soon do it, on my own. That's just me. It may be easier for you this way, and more power to you. So if you have any questions, let me know. Of course, I will have a link to this site as well, so you can bookmark this and come on back here anytime you need help with MLA formatting.